I turned 78 last month. Hazel and Austin didn't even remember. Or rather, they remembered the next day when I mentioned it at breakfast. Hazel raised her eyebrows then, looked at the wall calendar, and pretended to splay her hands. "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry, I got totally caught up in this charity thing." I only nodded. Austin didn't even look up from his clipboard. I'd long since gotten used to it, though. There used to be congratulations, gifts, cakes with candles. Back in Elaine's day. She never forgot. 3 years without her, I still wake up and reach for her side of the bed. Today I woke up in my room, a small room with north-facing windows, the coldest room in my daughter's house. It's always chilly in here in the mornings, especially for my old bones. Hazel calls it the guest room, as if I'm a guest, even though I've lived here for almost 2 years. A guest room for my own father. Symbolic, isn't it? I sat down on the bed, putting my feet on the cool floor, and fumbled for my slippers. My old soft slippers Hazel had thrown out almost immediately after I moved in, claiming they were unsanitary. Now I have stiff leather flip-flops, which she considers more presentable. Though who and what am I supposed to be presentable to at 7 in the morning? The smell of coffee wafted from the kitchen. Austin always gets up earlier than everyone else so he can make the run around the block to work. He prides himself on his discipline. "At my age, Edmund, it's important to watch yourself or you'll be in trouble in your old age," he likes to say. These words are always tinged with a touch of condescension, as if I'm a prime example of all the problems that can arise. I want to tell him that at 45 he's not as young as he thinks he is, but I've long since learned to keep my mouth shut in this house. I put on my robe and leave the room. There were pictures hanging on the walls in the hallway, Hazel and Austin on their wedding day, the two of them in front of the Eiffel Tower, at a ski resort, on a yacht. Not one picture of me or Elaine. It's like we never existed, like Hazel had grown on her own, like a weed in a vacant lot. In the kitchen, Austin was making himself a protein shake in a blender. He nodded at my appearance without interrupting the loud whirring of the machine. I poured myself some coffee from the coffee maker and sat down at the table. The coffee was too strong and bitter for my taste, but Austin always insists that real coffee should be just that. My requests for a milder variety are ignored. "Good morning," I said when the blender finally shut up. "Morning," Austin said, pouring the greenish slurry into a sports bottle. "There's oatmeal on the stove if you want it." Oatmeal. Every morning. Not a chance. Hazel and Austin watch their diet, and since I live in their house, I have to eat what they eat. "At your age, you need to watch your cholesterol especially carefully," Hazel told me when I once asked for scrambled eggs and bacon. Funny thing is, my cholesterol has been normal for 40 years, but Austin has blood pressure problems, but we don't talk about that. "Thanks," I said, though I had no appetite. Austin looked at his watch, finished his cocktail, and put the bottle in the sink without rinsing it. "I've got to go for a run. Remind Hazel I'll be late tonight. We have a meeting with some new clients." I nodded. Austin is a financial consultant at a large firm. He never misses a chance to mention it. When I moved in with them, he offered to help manage the money I made from the sale of the house. "At your age, it's best to trust a professional with that, Dad," Hazel encouraged him. "They always say at your age like I'm 120 instead of 78. I agreed to give them a portion of the funds for investing, a lot less than they think. The major savings I've accumulated over 40 years as a hydraulic engineer are in accounts that no living soul knows about. Even Elaine didn't know about all of them. For a rainy day, I always said, and she didn't argue, trusting me in financial matters. The rainy day came when she was diagnosed with cancer. The last months of her life were filled with hospitals, medications, and procedures. Insurance didn't cover everything, and I didn't hesitate to spend the savings. But even when she was gone, I still had enough left. More than enough. Hazel and Austin have no idea. After Austin left, I went back to my room to get dressed. I opened my closet, a small closet, a third of the space taken up by things Hazel keeps here for some reason. My closet is modest. A few shirts, 2 pants, a couple sweaters. The rest is left in boxes in the garage. "You don't need that much stuff, Dad. It just clutters up the house," Hazel said when I was moving in. Our house, a spacious Victorian mansion in a quiet Connecticut neighborhood, sold for a sum that seemed impressive to my daughter and son-in-law. To them, it was a lot of money. To me, it was a fraction of what I had. But I didn't dissuade them. Let them think they knew everything. The house where Elaine and I had lived for almost 50 years, where Hazel had grown up, where every corner held memories, sold to strangers. I resisted at first, but they were persistent. "It's hard for you to keep such a big house by yourself. It's dangerous for you to live alone at your age. We're worried about you, Dad." In a way, they were right. After Elaine died, the house seemed empty. I hung around the rooms talking to myself, sometimes forgetting to eat. But I got by. I had a routine. There were neighbors who stopped by occasionally. There was a garden I tended. There was life. Now it's gone. Hazel came down to the kitchen as I was just finishing my oatmeal. She was in a silk robe with flawless makeup, even though she had just gotten up. My daughter always looks perfect. Sometimes I think she sleeps with her makeup on, too. "Good morning, Dad," she said, heading for the coffee maker. "Did you sleep well?" The usual morning ritual, she asks, and I say I did, even though I wake up 5 times a night and lie awake, staring at the ceiling and reminiscing. "Austin told me to tell you he's going to be late today," I said. "He had a meeting." Hazel nodded, not really interested. She teaches art history at the community college 3 days a week. Today is one of her work days. "What do you have planned for today?" she asked, sitting down across from me with a cup of coffee. This question is also part of the ritual. What could an old man, locked in someone else's house, have planned? "Thought I'd read," I answered. "Maybe I'll walk to the park." Hazel pressed her lips together. "It's supposed to rain today. You'd better stay home. You don't want to get wet and cold." I looked out the window. The sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. But there was no use arguing. "All right," I agreed. "I'll stay home." She smiled, pleased with my submission. "I'll leave your lunch in the fridge. Just heat it up in the microwave, and don't forget to take your medication." I nodded again. Medication, another way of control. Hazel has insisted I take vitamins and supplements she deems necessary at my age. I put them in my pocket and throw them away when no one sees. My doctor says I am healthy for my age and no special medications are needed. When Hazel left, the house fell into silence. I sat in a chair in the living room with a book, but I didn't read. I looked out the window at the street where neighbors' children played. Young mothers with strollers returned from jogging, and people hurried about their business. Life was passing by. I thought back to our old house, the big garden where Elaine grew roses, the veranda where we had tea in the evenings, the study with my books and drawings, Hazel's nursery, which we kept even after she left for college. When she was little, I was her hero. "My daddy builds dams and saves cities from floods," she would proudly tell her friends. I would take her to some of the sites, explaining how the floodgates worked, how water pressure was calculated. She would listen with her mouth open and then ask questions that surprised even my colleagues. When did things change? When did I go from hero to liability? Maybe when she met Austin in grad school? He always looked down on me, thinking my profession wasn't prestigious enough. "Hydrologic engineer? Is that something to do with plumbing?" He asked the first time we met, and I immediately realized we weren't going to be friends. Or had the change occurred after Elaine's death? Hazel was taking the loss of her mother hard, but instead of grieving with me, it was as if she had distanced herself even more. Maybe I was reminding her that she was mortal too, or that she hadn't visited her mother often enough in recent years, busy with her career and life. I sighed and set the book aside. Everything in the daughter's house was beautiful and modern. Designer furniture, abstract paintings on the walls, sterile cleanliness. Not a single personal item, not a single photo from the past. It was as if Hazel and Austin had come out of nowhere, no history, no roots. My gaze fell on the newspaper Austin had left on the table, the financial section. I picked it up and started looking at the stock quotes. Out of old habit, I noted in my mind the changes in my investment portfolio. Over the years, I'd learned to understand finance as well as a professional like Austin. Perhaps even better, judging by the state of my accounts. It all started with small investments in the stocks of the companies I worked with. Then I got interested in the stock market, studying charts, trends, making predictions. Elaine laughed at my hobby, called it a hobby for boring engineers, but didn't mind as long as I didn't take too much risk. And I didn't. I was cautious, conservative in my choices, but persistent and consistent. The result exceeded all expectations. Sometimes I think Austin would be shocked to learn that his old father-in-law owned stock in the companies whose clients he's trying so hard to attract, or that the amount in my accounts is several times their family's annual income. But I don't talk. I keep my secret. It gives me a strange satisfaction, especially when I hear my son-in-law's condescending comments about the financial illiteracy of the older generation. Sometimes I dream of leaving here, to rent an apartment or even buy a new house, to live by my own rules without supervision or control, but something keeps me here. Maybe it's habit, or fear of loneliness, or the hope that one day Hazel will look at me again with the same admiration I had as a child. Foolish hope. My daughter has long since grown up and become a stranger, a man who thinks I'm a burden, who can't wait to put me in a nursing home under the pretense of caring for me. I know about their plans, heard them discussing options for decent care for my father late at night, thinking I was asleep. Sunset Villa is a luxury nursing home in the suburbs. There's great care, recreational programs, medical care, Austin said. And we'll be able to visit every weekend, Hazel chimed in. They didn't even ask my opinion. Maybe it's time to act. Time to take back control of my life. Time to show them that Edmund Baxter hadn't yet turned into the helpless old man they thought I was. I folded the paper and looked at the phone. Maybe I should call a realtor, see what housing options were available, or look at a new car. Hazel had sold my old Buick along with the house, saying it was dangerous for me to drive at my age. But no one took away my license, and neither did the desire to drive. I took my phone and started looking for apartment ads on the internet, just out of curiosity. Just out of curiosity for now. Saturday mornings at my daughter's house always start the same way. Austin is out jogging. Hazel is making a healthy breakfast that smells like cardboard and looks like rabbit food. I walk down to the living room with the newspaper I have written out in my name, my one whim for which I regularly get leering looks. Dad, why spend money on a paper newspaper when you can read all the news online? Hazel was in a particularly high spirits today, fluttering around the kitchen, humming something. That could only mean one thing. Something she considered important was coming up, usually another reception for her co-workers or Austin's friends. "Good morning, Dad," she exclaimed when she saw me. "How did you sleep?" "Not bad," I lied. Actually, it had been a rough night. The pain in my back kept me awake, and when I finally dozed off, I dreamed of Elaine. She was standing in our old garden among the roses, calling to me. I woke up in a cold sweat. "Oh, great!" Hazel clearly wasn't interested in my real answer. "We're going to have guests today, the dean and some professors from the department. Dinner's at 7 o'clock. I'll cook something special." I nodded, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Would I need to change?" Hazel froze, a spoonful of quinoa hovering over the bowl. "Actually, Dad, I thought you could have dinner at your place. You know, so you don't get tired. We'll be talking about work. You'll be bored." I wasn't surprised. It's not the first time I've been sent to my room like a cranky child when there are guests in the house. Usually, the excuse is different. You'll be too noisy. You'll get tired quickly. It'll be smoky in there. Although Austin and Hazel never let guests smoke in the house. Sure, I said, trying to hide the bitterness in my voice. I wasn't going to come down. Hazel's face brightened. I'll bring you dinner on a tray. Something light. And maybe you could take a sleeping pill early. The guests might be staying late. Sleeping pills. That's another one of their ideas. I never took sleeping pills before I moved in. But Hazel insisted on seeing a doctor who prescribed me the pills after a 5-minute consultation. These will help you rest better, Dad. I only take them when she's watching. The rest go down the toilet. Okay, I agreed again. It was easier to agree than to explain that I didn't want to turn into a vegetable because of the chemo. Austin came back, flushed and smug from his run. He does 10 kilometers every Saturday and Sunday. Gotta keep fit, he repeats, glancing at my belly, which he thinks is too big for a man my age. Edmund. He nods at me instead of greeting me. He never calls me Daddy or father-in-law. Only by my first name as if I were his neighbor or a casual acquaintance. Did you remember about dinner? Hazel asked, serving him a smoothie. Of course, dear. We need to impress old man Higgins, Austin winked at her. If he supports your candidacy for department chair, it's a done deal. So that's what this is about. Hazel's up for promotion. I can see why they're sending me to my room. The dean can't find out a potential chair has an old dad as a liability. I already told Daddy he'd better eat dinner upstairs, Hazel said. Austin gave me a quick glance. That's right. You'll be more comfortable up there, Edmund. We don't want you to overwork yourself. Their concern always sounds fake, like lines from a bad movie about caring relatives. In 2 years of living here, I have never once felt genuinely cared for. Only control and annoyance at my presence. I turned back to the paper, pretending to be immersed in reading. Austin and Hazel continued to discuss the evening as if I wasn't in the room. They often do that, talk in front of me, but not to me. It's like I'm furniture or a pet. By the way, Austin said suddenly, lowering his voice, but not enough for me not to hear, did you talk to him about Sunset Villa? Hazel cast an anxious glance in my direction. Not now, she whispered. Later. I pretended I hadn't heard, but my insides clenched. It was that nursing home again. They've been hinting for months now that I'd be better off there. Every time I drop something or forget to turn off the bathroom light, there's a comment. You don't have to worry about those things at Sunset Villa. Or, they'll take care of you there around the clock. I don't want to go to a nursing home. I don't want to sit in a rocking chair among other old people, playing bingo and waiting for the nurse to bring medication. I want to live my life for as long as I have left. After breakfast, Hazel rushed off to shop for dinner, and Austin retired to his office to work. I knew he was actually playing a golf simulator on the computer. I could hear the distinctive sounds through the door, but I pretended to believe in his work ethic, even on weekends. I walked out to the backyard, sat in a chair under an oak tree, and closed my eyes. The warmth of Saturday morning reminded me of our old garden. I could see Elaine pruning the roses, little Hazel running between the beds, us barbecuing for the neighbors. Edmund! Edmund! Austin's voice snapped me out of my memories. He was standing on the veranda, clearly annoyed. Could you come inside, please? The gardeners are coming in an hour to mow the lawn. I don't want you in the way. I held back a sigh and got up from the chair. There's no room for me even in the yard. Back in the house, I stopped at the bookcase in the living room. Once I had a rich library, technical reference books, classic literature, historical monographs. Now it all lay in boxes in the garage. In Austin and Hazel's closet are fancy business books, art albums, and a few hardcover novels bought, it seems, just for the interior. I doubt any of them have opened War and Peace or Ulysses, which sits on the most prominent shelf. I picked up a book at random, some kind of detective, and went upstairs to my room. The room was stuffy. The window was only open for airing, at Hazel's insistence. "For your safety, Dad." As if I could fall out of a second-story window like an unreasonable child. No sooner had I settled down with my book than I heard voices downstairs. Hazel had returned with her shopping, and she and Austin were arguing about something. I couldn't help but listen. "I'm telling you, he won't go for it." Austin's voice sounded annoyed. "We have to try," Hazel insisted. "I can't go on like this. It's too hard." "What's hard?" "He barely requires any attention." "You don't understand. I worry all the time. What if he falls, or forget to turn off the stove, or—" "Then all the more reason to act decisively. We both know that Sunset Villa is the best solution." A pause. Then Hazel's voice, quieter. "But he's so stubborn. He always has been." "Honey, this is your father we're talking about, not the baby. He can't just say no. After all, it's for his own good." I clenched my fists. "For my own good?" That's what they always say when they make decisions for me. Like I'm incapacitated or have dementia. As if 78 years of life and a career as an engineer hadn't taught me how to make my own decisions. I spent the rest of the day in my room, pretending to read but actually replaying the conversation between my daughter and son-in-law in my head. They were preparing for a serious conversation with me, and I had to prepare myself too. At 6 p.m. Hazel brought me dinner on a tray, chicken broth, toast, and an apple. "Light and healthy," she said with a fake smile. I thanked her and asked if I needed help getting ready for the reception. She almost waved her hands in horror. "No way, Dad! Get some rest!" An hour later, the house was filled with voices, laughter, the clinking of glasses, the smell of expensive perfume. I sat in my room, listening to the fun downstairs. No one even thought to introduce me to the guests. It was as if I didn't exist. Dinner dragged on until midnight. I stayed awake, listening to the sounds of goodbyes, the noise of dishes being washed, the soft conversation between Hazel and Austin when they finally went upstairs. They were pleased with the evening. "Higgins is obviously impressed," Austin said. "I think my chances are good," Hazel replied. The next morning they slept late and I got up early as usual. Brewed myself some coffee and made toast with jam, a rare treat that I can only afford when they're not around. Hazel thinks jam is too sweet for my age. I was eating my forbidden breakfast when Austin came down to the kitchen, disheveled and red-eyed. When he saw me with my toast, he wrinkled his nose but didn't say anything. He poured himself some water and swallowed a headache pill. "Did you drink a lot last night?" I asked, unable to resist a small quip. Austin looked at me with annoyance. It was fine. Grown-ups do that sometimes, you know. His tone clearly said, "Unlike you, I have the right to relax." I stayed silent, finishing my coffee. Soon, Hazel came downstairs, unlike her husband, fresh and alert. She always tolerates alcohol better. "Good morning," she sang. But when she saw my toast with jam, she frowned. "Dad, we talked about sugar. It's bad for you." "One jam toast in 80 years of my life won't kill me," I replied calmly. "You're 78, Dad," Hazel corrected me, as if it mattered. "So what? I won't live to be 80 because of jam?" Hazel rolled her eyes, a gesture she'd adopted from Austin. "Don't be dramatic. I'm just looking out for your health." "Thanks, but I can take care of myself," I said more firmly than I meant to. There was an awkward pause. Austin and Hazel looked at each other. I realized I'd given them the perfect excuse for a serious talk. "Actually, Dad," Hazel began, taking a seat across from me, "we've been meaning to talk to you about this." Austin sat down at the table with his hands folded like a business meeting. "About what?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "About your ability to take care of yourself," Hazel said softly, as if addressing a child. "Austin and I are worried. You're becoming forgetful. You get confused sometimes. That's normal at your age, but I'm not confused, I interrupted, and my memory's fine. You forgot to turn off the water in the bathroom last week, Austin countered. And before that, you almost left the stove on. I wanted to say that he'd left the stove on when he was making his tea, but I didn't. It's no use arguing when they've made up their minds. What's your point? I asked directly. Hazel took a deep breath. We think you'd be better off in an institution, where professionals will take care of you. A nursing home, I clarified. A residence for the elderly, Hazel corrected. Sunset Villa is not a nursing home. It's a luxury complex with individual apartments, restaurant, swimming pool, entertainment program, and nurses who make sure the old people take their medicine on time and don't pee their pants, I finished for her. Dad! Hazel was outraged. You're exaggerating everything. No, you're exaggerating. I'm perfectly capable of living on my own. I don't need round-the-clock supervision. Austin stepped forward, his voice hardening. Edmund, let's face it. You're not young anymore. Your health is not perfect. You need constant care. My health is fine, I objected. Ask my doctor. We talked to Dr. Mitchell, Hazel said. He agrees that Sunset Villa would be the best option for you. I felt anger boiling up inside me. They were talking to my doctor behind my back, making decisions about my life without asking me. I'm not going to any Sunset Villa, I said firmly, and don't discuss my health with anyone without my knowledge. Hazel sighed, as if she were dealing with a cranky child. Dad, we realize this is a difficult decision, but think of us too. We can't give you the care you need. We have jobs, social lives, and you are hindered by an old man who spoils the interior and scares away guests, I finished for her. Nobody said that, Hazel exclaimed, but I could see in Austin's eyes that I had hit the mark. There's no need to be dramatic, Edmund, he said, trying to sound reasonable. This isn't about you getting in the way. It's about you being better off among your peers, with professional care. I don't need professional care, I repeated, and I'm not going to any nursing home. Hazel and Austin looked at each other again. I could tell from their faces that they had been preparing for my rejection and had a plan B. We signed up for a tour of Sunset Villa next Saturday, Hazel said, just to see it. No commitment, but I'm sure you'll love it there. I shook my head. I don't need a tour. I'm not interested. Austin was beginning to lose his patience. Look, Edmund, we're trying to find a compromise, but if you won't cooperate, then what? I asked, looking him straight in the eye. You're going to throw me out on the street. No one's kicking anyone out, Hazel said quickly. We just want you to consider all your options. I have. And the answer is no. I stood up from the table, signaling that the conversation was over, but Austin wasn't going to back down. Sit down, please, he said with pressure. We're not done. I'm done, I replied, and headed for the stairs. For the next few days, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Hazel and Austin talked to me dryly and formally. No questions about how I was feeling, no offers to watch TV together. Just, dinner is on the table, and don't forget to take your medication. I didn't mind this cold truce. It gave me time to think and plan my actions. I started looking at apartment ads, checking my bills, making a list of things I wanted to take with me. On Friday, back from college, Hazel brought up Sunset Villa again. Dad, I made an appointment with the director tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. They'll show us the apartments, introduce us to the staff. I already said I'm not going, I interrupted. Hazel gritted her teeth. You haven't even seen the place. How can you judge? I don't need to see it. I don't want to live in a nursing home. Period. That evening I heard her and Austin arguing in the bedroom. Their voices were muffled, but the words still came through. Unbearably stubborn, Austin said. Like a child. He's always been like that, Hazel answered. But I don't understand why he won't even look at Sunset Villa. It's not a prison. We've been coddling him for too long. It's time to step up our game. What do you suggest? I say we confront him, either Sunset Villa or find another place to live. There was a pause. Then Hazel's voice, uncertain. You want to kick my father out? I want him to make a sensible decision, for his own good. The next morning, when I came down for breakfast, Hazel and Austin were already waiting for me. They were dressed for going out, Hazel in a slinky dress, Austin in slacks and a shirt. Good morning, Dad, Hazel said tautly. We're ready to go. Where to? I asked, even though I knew the answer. To Sunset Villa, of course. We have a meeting at 10. I shook my head. I'm not going anywhere. I'd already told you that. Austin stepped forward. Edmund, we've been patient. We tried to explain things amicably, but you don't seem to understand the situation. I understand the situation perfectly well, I replied calmly. You want to get rid of me because I'm interfering with your social life. That's not fair, exclaimed Hazel with tears in her eyes. We want you to have a good time. If you really wanted me to feel good, you would respect my wishes. Austin lost his patience. Enough of this circus. You're coming with us today, period. Or what? I asked, looking him in the eye. Or you pack your bags and find another place to live, he blurted out. Austin, Hazel gasped. No, honey, that's enough, he said. For 2 years we've put up with his stubbornness, his nagging, his constant resentment. We offer a civilized solution, and he acts like a spoiled child. I looked at them and suddenly felt a strange relief. The masks are off. No more fake concern, no more fake smiles. Only the truth. I was a burden to them, a burden to be got rid of. All right, I said calmly. I'll leave. They both stared at me in disbelief. What? Hazel exhaled. I said I'll leave. I'll find another place to live, like your husband suggested. Austin seemed confused by my calmness. But, where would you go? What will you do? That's not your concern anymore, is it? I said with a slight smile. You wanted to get rid of me. Congratulations, you've succeeded. Hazel looked confused. Dad, nobody wants to get rid of you. We just… Stop it, Hazel, I interrupted gently. Let's not pretend anymore. I'm in your way. I understand. And I'll leave. But how will you… What will you live on? She asked, and I could hear a glimmer of genuine concern in her voice. I have a pension, I answered, and some savings. Don't worry, I won't be on the street. Austin frowned, clearly trying to assess the situation. He hadn't expected me to agree to leave so easily. Do you realize that this is a big decision? He asked. Living alone at your age. I lived 76 years before I moved in with you, I reminded him. I'd managed. You were younger, Hazel countered, and Mom was there for you. I can handle it, I repeated firmly. Give me a week to find a place to live and organize the move. They looked at each other as if they couldn't believe it was so simple. Okay, Austin said at last. A week is a week. I nodded and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? Hazel asked. To my room. I need to start packing. As I walked up the stairs, I could hear them talking quietly downstairs. Austin was saying something about it being for the best, that maybe I'd come to my senses in a couple days. Hazel was silent. In my room, I sat on my bed and took a deep breath. I'd been kicked out of my own daughter's house. My new apartment was brighter and more spacious than I had expected. The 2 large windows in the living room faced east, and the room was filled with sunlight in the mornings. The bedroom is small, but there is more than enough room for my single bed. The kitchen is compact, but functional, with all the necessary appliances. Most importantly, no one controls what and when I cook. I found this place 3 days after Austin's ultimatum. I called a realtor, looked at a few options, and settled on this apartment in a quiet Connecticut neighborhood just 20 minutes from Hazel's house. Not that I planned to visit them often, but I liked the idea that I wasn't running to the other side of the world. The rent was higher than I had anticipated, but that didn't deter me. For the first time in a long time, I could afford not to count every dime. When the realtor, a full-figured woman in her 50s named Winona Parrish, suggested I look at cheaper options, I just smiled and said I was fine with the price. She raised her eyebrows in surprise, probably wondering how a pensioner could afford such an apartment. But she kept silent. Professional ethics. "I can have the contract ready by tomorrow, Mr. Baxter," she said. "I'll need the first and last month's rent, plus a deposit." I nodded. "No problem. I can pay 6 months in advance if it makes things easier." Her eyebrows rose even higher now. "That won't be necessary, but if it's more convenient for you." "It's more comfortable for me," I explained. "At my age, it's better to be sure of the future." She nodded understandingly, though I could see that she had more questions. But then again, she was a professional and didn't ask about my finances. Hazel and Austin reacted to the news of the found apartment with a mixture of surprise and relief. I guess they didn't believe I would actually leave. Or maybe they hoped that the housing search would be unsuccessful and I would settle for Sunset Villa after all. "So soon?" Hazel asked when I told her I was moving in a week. "Are you sure you're not in a hurry, Dad?" "I'm absolutely sure," I replied. "The apartment is great, the neighborhood is nice, everything is fine." Rent?" she asked cautiously. "Can you afford it?" I smiled. "Don't worry about my finances, dear. I can afford it quite well." Austin frowned. "But your pension," he began. "My pension is only part of my income," I interrupted him. "I have other sources." They looked at each other, clearly puzzled. In the 2 years they had been together, they had grown accustomed to seeing me as a poor old man who was completely at their mercy. The idea that I might have my own means seemed absurd to them. "What other sources?" Austin asked bluntly. I shrugged my shoulders. "All sorts. Investments, savings. I've worked all my life, you know." Austin looked skeptical. "But you gave us the money from the sale of the house to invest. Why didn't you mention any other assets?" "Because you didn't ask," I answered simply. "You were so sure you knew everything about my finances that I didn't want to disappoint you. In fact, I never intentionally hid my assets. It's just that after Elaine's death, when Hazel and Austin started insisting that I sell the house and move in with them, they immediately took on the role of financial guardians. They talked to me about money as if I were a child who didn't understand the value of a dollar. "Let us help you with investing the money from the sale of the house, Dad," Hazel said then. "Austin is much better at that." I agreed to give them a portion, about a third of the sale. I put the rest into a separate account I didn't mention. Nor did I mention several other accounts I'd opened in the 80s and 90s, when my first investment started making serious profits. I never considered myself a rich man, just sensible and prudent. Stocks, bonds, units in investment funds. I diversified my investments long before it became a fashionable trend. Some investments did better than others, but overall, my portfolio always showed steady growth. Elaine knew about my passion for the stock market, but not the extent of my savings. She considered it a hobby, not a serious source of income. I didn't dissuade her, although by the time she died, the amount in the accounts was several times the value of our house. The move to the new apartment was quick and without too much drama. I didn't take much stuff from Hazel's house, just clothes, books, and a few memorabilia. The furniture in the apartment was new, chosen by myself in a furniture store. For the first time in many years, I could furnish the house to my own taste, rather than adjust to someone else's ideas about the appropriate style. Hazel insisted on helping with the move, even though I assured her I could do it myself. I think she was a little embarrassed by the way things had turned out. Or maybe she just wanted to make sure I was really leaving. "It's a nice apartment, Dad," she said, helping me unpack boxes of books. "And the neighborhood is nice." "Glad you like it," I replied. "It's more important that I like it, though." Hazel sighed. "Are you still mad at us?" I looked at her. My only daughter, who I once carried on my shoulders and taught to ride a bike, who now looks at me with a mixture of guilt and annoyance. I'm not angry, Hazel. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. We meant well, she said the familiar phrase. Maybe. But you didn't ask what I wanted. That was the end of it. We spent the rest of the day in relative peace, unpacking and putting things away. By evening, Hazel had left, promising to visit me the following week. I knew she wasn't coming, and I wasn't sure I wanted her to. The first night in the new apartment was strange. The unfamiliar silence, the absence of footsteps overhead, the freedom to turn on the lights or the TV at any time without fear of disturbing others. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the ticking of the clock and thinking about how my life had changed over the past 3 years. Elaine's death, selling the house, moving in with my daughter, and now this apartment. A new beginning at 78. I woke up this morning to sunlight pouring in through the uncurtained window. No one was banging on the door reminding me of breakfast. No one was controlling what I ate or when I took my medication. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I made myself a real breakfast: scrambled eggs and bacon, toast with jam, strong coffee. Everything that was forbidden in Hazel's house. Turned on the radio and found a jazz station, another little treat I'd been deprived of. Austin couldn't stand jazz, considering it music for old people. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, getting to know the area. The day was clear, warm. I walked slowly, without hurry, looking at houses, stores, cafes. In a small park not far from my house, children were playing. Young mothers were chatting on benches. I sat down to rest, observing this peaceful picture. An elderly woman with a small dog on a leash lowered herself onto the bench next to me. We got to talking. Her name was Doris Hummel, 73, and she had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. We exchanged pleasantries, complained about the weather and the prices, as older strangers usually do when they meet. But there was something comforting about her: a sharp wit, a sense of humor, a lack of the condescension with which I was usually treated. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked. "I know almost everyone in the neighborhood." "Moved in last week," I answered. "An apartment on Maple Street." "Oh, good choice. Quiet street, but everything you need is close by. What brings you to our neighborhood if it's not a secret?" I hesitated, not knowing how much to tell a stranger, but there was something in her open gaze that made me want to be frank. "I decided to start a new life," I said at last. "That sounds funny at my age, doesn't it?" Doris smiled. "Not at all. I divorced my husband at 65 after 40 years of marriage and started a new life too. It's never too late." We talked for almost an hour. Doris turned out to be a former literature teacher, a widow. Her second husband had died 3 years earlier, with 2 sons who lived in other states. She was the first person in a long time to talk to me as an equal, not as an infirm old man. Back home, I felt a surge of energy and determination. It was time to take care of another important matter: transportation. At Hazel's house, I was totally dependent on her or Austin if I needed to go anywhere. They sold my old Buick along with the house, convincing me that it was already dangerous to drive at my age. But my driver's license is still valid, and the desire to drive didn't go away. I decided to buy a car. Not just any car, my dream car. All my life I've driven practical family sedans. Buick, Ford, Chevy. Reliable, unremarkable, economical. Elaine thought sports cars were a bliss for men going through a midlife crisis. "When you're 60 and you want a red convertible, I'll know you're crazy," she joked. I'm well past 60. Maybe I really had lost my mind. But now that no one was controlling my decisions, the thought of a sports car seemed more and more appealing. I opened up my laptop and began researching the offerings of car dealerships. At first, just out of curiosity, with no serious intentions. But the more I looked at the glossy pictures of powerful cars, the stronger the desire became. Why not? I have enough money. I'm of sound mind and good judgment. Why can't I please myself in my old age? The next day, I went to the Prestige Motors dealership on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the biggest dealership, but they specialized in sports and luxury cars. I wanted to just take a look, maybe even test drive one. You don't have to buy one right away. The showroom greeted me with the coolness of air conditioners and the shine of chrome. The cars stood on podiums like exhibits in a museum, flawless, alluring, inaccessible. I felt a little out of place amidst this luxury, but I moved forward with determination. The young salesman frowned slightly when he saw me. An older man in plain clothes didn't look like a prospective customer for a six-figure sports car. "What can I do for you, sir?" he asked without much enthusiasm. "I'm looking for a car," I replied. "A sports car, powerful, maybe even a convertible." He looked at me doubtfully. "For your son?" "For me," I said firmly. "I want to make myself happy in my old age." The salesman, his name tag read Pierce Sheldon, looked puzzled, but professionalism prevailed. "Of course, sir. Do you have a specific brand or model preference?" I shook my head. "Not particularly. Show me what you have. I'm open to suggestions." Pierce walked me around the showroom, showing me various models. He talked about horsepower, torque, acceleration to 100 kilometers, safety systems. I listened attentively, asked questions, got into the details. My engineering nature demanded understanding of technical characteristics, not just appearance. And then I saw it. A Jaguar F-Type, bright red with a convertible top. It stood in the corner of the showroom as if waiting for me. I walked towards it like I was hypnotized. "Ah, you noticed our Jaguar," Pierce said, following me. "Nice choice. 3-liter supercharger V6, 380 horsepower, 100 kilometers in 4.9 seconds. One of the best roadsters on the market." I walked around the car, examining every detail. Smooth lines, aggressive front end, elegant proportions. The car looked like it was ready to take off even when standing still. "Can I get in?" I asked. "Sure." Pierce opened the door. I sank into the leather seat and put my hands on the steering wheel. The interior enveloped me like a cocoon. Everything was at arm's length, every button and switch intuitive. I felt young. "How much does it cost?" I asked without getting out of the car. Pierce quoted 6 zeros. I nodded, neither surprised nor concerned. The price was high, but not out of my reach. "I'd like to test drive it," I said. Pierce hesitated. "Of course, sir, but first I'll need to make a copy of your driver's license and—" At that moment, the front door of the saloon opened and 2 men entered. A woman in an elegant suit and a man in an expensive shirt and pants. Hazel and Austin. I froze in surprise. They didn't notice me right away, stopping at the receptionist's desk. I heard Austin say something about pre-registering for a test drive of the new Audi. Apparently, they'd decided to upgrade their fleet of cars, too. Pierce looked back at the new visitors but continued talking to me. "So, your driver's license." I reached into my wallet, pulled out my driver's license and credit card. "Here you go. And I want to clarify, is this car for sale or just for test drive?" "It's available for purchase, sir," Pierce replied, accepting the documents. "But usually we recommend a test drive first, especially with such specific models." "I understand," I nodded. "But if I like it after the test drive, I'd like to pick it up today." Now Pierce looked genuinely surprised. "Today? It's possible, but there'd be paperwork, insurance." "I'll pay cash," I said. "The full amount. Would that make it easier?" Pierce's eyes widened. "Cash? The full amount?" I nodded, seeing nothing unusual in that. I'd always been in the habit of keeping substantial sums in cash, ever since the days when I didn't trust wire transfers. I'd never put some of the money from the sale of the house in the bank, preferring to keep it in a safe place. "Yes, the full amount," I confirmed. "Is that a problem?" "No, sir. No problem at all. Pierce brightened up. I'll arrange a test drive right away and then we can discuss the details of the purchase. He hurried to the front desk with my paperwork. It was at that moment that Hazel turned her head and saw me sitting in a bright red Jaguar. Her eyes widened in surprise. She nudged Austin and pointed in my direction. He turned around, a look of amazement on his face that would have made me laugh in another situation. They walked over to me, still in shock. "Dad?" Hazel said uncertainly. "What are you doing here?" I smiled without getting out of the car. "Same as you, I guess. Picking out a new car." Austin shifted his gaze from me to the Jaguar and back again. "You're trying this on?" He pointed at the car as if I were sitting in a spaceship. "Not just trying it on," I replied. "I'm going to buy it if I like it after the test drive." Hazel laughed nervously. "Dad, you're kidding, right? This car costs—" "I know how much it costs," I interrupted her, "and I can afford it." Austin shook his head. "Edmund, be reasonable. Even if you have some savings, to spend them on such an extravagant purchase. Extravagant purchase." At that moment, Pierce returned with my papers and car keys. "All set for the test drive, Mr. Baxter," he said, but he stopped when he saw Hazel and Austin. "Oh, you two know each other?" "This is my daughter and son-in-law," I explained. "Do they want to take the test drive too?" I looked at their confused faces and smiled. "No, they're here on business. I'd rather ride alone." Pierce nodded and opened the passenger side door to sit next to me. But before we drove off, Hazel grabbed my arm. "Dad, are you sure it's safe? At your age, such a powerful car." "At my age, Hazel, I'm entitled to small pleasures," I replied. "And yes, I'm sure I can handle it. I've been driving a car longer than you've been alive." Pierce and I drove out of the cabin. The Jaguar was as gorgeous in motion as it looked. Powerful, responsive, with perfect handling. I quickly got the hang of it, and by the end of the test drive I felt as if I had owned this car forever. When we got back to the cabin, Hazel and Austin were gone. They had probably been taken away by another manager to discuss their own purchase, or maybe they were too shocked to wait for me to return. "How do you like the car, Mr. Baxter?" Pierce asked when we parked. "I'll take it," I answered without hesitation. "Get the papers." While Pierce prepared the paperwork, I pulled an envelope of cash from my inside jacket pocket. I'd taken it out of the safety deposit box yesterday, planning this purchase. The amount was large, but not critical to my budget. I could afford this expense without jeopardizing my financial future. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Hazel and Austin come out of the manager's office and see me at the counter with wads of bills in my hands. Their faces expressed such shock that I could barely contain a smile. They came over just as I was finishing counting the money. "Dad," Hazel's voice sounded almost pleading, "you can't just spend all your savings on a car. Think about the future, about medical expenses, about—" "Hazel," I said calmly, not stopping my counting. "It's not all of my savings, not even a tenth of it." Austin snorted incredulously. "Not a tenth of it? Do you mean to say you have—" "A lot more than you realized," I finished for him, laying out the last wad. "Always had." The new Jaguar stood in front of my house, glistening in the sunshine with red paint. I admired it from the window, sipping my morning coffee. I never thought that, at my age, I would feel such childlike enthusiasm for a car. But this car was more than just a means of transportation. It was a symbol of my new life, a life where I made my own decisions without looking at other people's opinions. A week passed after the meeting at the car dealership. Hazel hadn't called, which didn't surprise me. She always did that when she was shocked or offended, stepping back to think about the situation. As a child, if I refused to buy her a new toy or forbade her to stay out late, she might not speak to me for days. Elaine called it a strategic retreat. I didn't rush things. Over the past 3 years, I'd learned to appreciate solitude. It had its own charm, the quiet, the opportunity to do what I wanted without having to adjust to someone else's schedule or listen to constant comments and good advice. My new routine was simple and pleasant: coffee and a newspaper in the morning. Then a walk in the park, where I sometimes met Doris and her dog. We chatted about the weather, about books, about local news, nothing and everything at once. After lunch, I usually drove my Jaguar somewhere, just for fun, without purpose, enjoying the speed and freedom. Evenings were spent reading or watching old movies that Elaine and I had once loved. The phone rang as I was getting ready for another walk. Hazel's number on the phone screen was no surprise. "Hello, daughter," I said as I picked up the phone. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded unusually soft. "How are you? How are you living in your new apartment?" "Fine," I answered honestly. "Everything is fine." "That's good." I paused. "Dad, Austin and I would like to come over tonight. If that's okay with you, of course. So that's it." A week of silence, and suddenly he's so eager to visit his old dad. Not surprising after what they saw at the car dealership. "Sure, come on down," I said. "I'd be glad to see you." Another pause. "Really? I thought you were still mad at us." "I'm not angry, Hazel. I'm just living my life." "Well, then we'll be there around 6 o'clock, if that's okay with you." "I'll be waiting." I put the phone away and wondered, what made them decide to make this visit? Curiosity? Concern for my well-being? Or interest in my financial situation? Admittedly, the latter seemed most likely after their reaction at the car dealership. I had prepared dinner for their arrival. Nothing fancy, a simple, home-cooked meal that I had learned to make while Elaine was still alive. Chicken baked with potatoes, salad, a bottle of good wine. It wasn't that I was trying to impress, I just wanted to show that I was quite capable of taking care of myself. They arrived at 6 sharp. Hazel looked a little tense, but she was smiling. Austin was subdued as usual. I noticed his gaze sliding over the parked Jaguar before he said hello to me. "Come on in," I invited, opening the door. "Dinner's almost ready." They entered looking around with undisguised curiosity. I could see Hazel noting the new furniture, the paintings on the walls, the modern appliances. Nothing extravagant, but everything was high quality and tasteful. "It's very cozy, Dad," she said, taking off her coat. "And spacious." "Thank you," I accepted their outerwear. "I like it." Austin walked into the living room where I set the table. "Something smells good," he said with some surprise. "Did you cook it yourself?" "Of course," I answered. "I've always been a good cook. I just didn't have the opportunity in your house." A slight shadow of embarrassment flashed across his face, but it quickly disappeared. They sat down at the table, and I poured wine into glasses. "To the meeting," I proposed a toast. We drank. The conversation didn't go well at first, just generalities about the weather and how the week had gone. I could see that they wanted to get to the main topic but didn't know how to start. So I decided to help. "How do you like the new car?" I asked as I put the salad on. "You've been to the car dealership to buy one too, haven't you?" Hazel and Austin looked at each other. "We were just looking around," Austin replied. "Nothing specific." "You surprised us, Dad," Hazel said, taking another sip of wine. "We didn't know you were in such a good financial position." There it is. We finally got to the point of their visit. "I never discussed my finances," I said calmly. "I didn't see the need to." "But we're a family," Hazel objected. "Isn't it natural to share that kind of information?" I looked at her carefully. "Have you ever shared information with me about your and Austin's income, about your investments or savings?" She was embarrassed. "Well, that's different." "Why?" I asked. "Because you're adults and have a right to financial privacy. I have exactly the same right." Austin coughed. "Edmund, no one is disputing your right to privacy. We were just surprised that you were hiding such significant assets." "I wasn't hiding anything," I replied as I began the main course. "You never asked. You just assumed I was poor and you acted on that assumption." There was an awkward pause. I could see them exchanging glances, trying to decide on a new tactic. Austin was the first to break the silence. "You're right. We made the wrong assumption. And maybe we didn't listen enough to your opinion in some matters." "Like Sunset Villa, for instance," I clarified. Hazel wrinkled her nose. "Dad, we really thought it was best for you. We were worried about me being a burden on your social life," I finished for her, "or that I wouldn't be able to pay my expenses. Now that you know that's not the case, has your worry miraculously disappeared?" She blushed. "It's not fair. We love you and have always wanted nothing but the best for you." I sighed. Maybe, somewhere deep down inside, Hazel did love me, but that love had long ago been buried under layers of convenience, habit, annoyance. She loved the idea of a father, not me myself, a real person with her own desires, habits, quirks. "I don't doubt that you meant well," I said more gently, "in your own way. But you never once asked me what I wanted. You made decisions for me because you thought you knew better." Austin set his fork aside. "Look, Edmund, we admit our mistakes. Maybe we should start over. Forget past wrongs." I looked at him, trying to see the sincerity behind those words. But all I saw was calculation. Now that they knew my condition, I was suddenly a valued member of the family, worthy of respect and attention. "I don't hold grudges," I said at last, "but I don't forget the lessons of the past." Dinner continued in a more relaxed atmosphere. We talked about neutral topics, Hazel's college work, the latest movies, the weather, but I sensed they weren't done with the main issue yet. After dinner, we adjourned to the living room with coffee. Hazel cautiously resumed the conversation about my finances. "Dad, pardon my curiosity, but how did you manage to save up that much money? You've always lived so modestly." I smiled. "Investments, Hazel. I started investing back in the 80s when I was working on a reservoir project in New Jersey. I met a financial analyst there who recommended some promising companies. I invested a little, then a little more. Over time, it turned into a hobby. I studied the market, followed trends, diversified my portfolio." Austin listened with undisguised interest. "And you never consulted a professional advisor?" "Sometimes I consulted, but I made the main decisions myself," I answered. "I always liked numbers, analytics. The engineer in me found pleasure in forecasting market trends." "And how successful were your investments?" Austin asked, trying to sound casual. I shrugged. "Successful enough that I could afford what I needed without worrying about the future." Hazel leaned forward. "Dad, maybe you should think about managing those funds more professionally. Austin might be able to help. He's got connections at the best investment firms. That's it. The real purpose of their visit. Not concern for my well-being, not a relationship. It was money. My money, which they now wanted to control." "Thanks for the offer," I said, "but my investments are well managed. I have a long-standing relationship with the brokerage firm Harris and Associates. I'm pleased with the results." Austin looked disappointed. "Harris and Associates? Never heard of them. Are you sure they provide the best terms? I could arrange a meeting with my contact at Goldman Sachs." "I appreciate your concern, Austin," I interrupted him, "but I don't plan to change financial advisors. They've been with me for almost 30 years, and I trust them." Hazel tried to come at it from a different angle. "Dad, we're just worried about you. At your age, it's easy to fall prey to scammers or unscrupulous counselors." "At my age," I repeated with a slight smile. How often had I heard that phrase from the two of you? "It's dangerous to drive at your age. At your age, you need to watch your diet. At your age, it's better to live in a nursing home. And now all of a sudden it turns out that at my age I am quite capable of earning and maintaining the fortune that you are so interested in." They both looked embarrassed. "That's not what we meant," Hazel began. "No?" I looked her straight in the eye. "What did you mean when you kicked me out of the house? When you treated me like a helpless child? When you made decisions about my life without asking my opinion. Austin tried to diffuse the situation. Edmund, let's not revisit past grievances. We come in peace to start over. A fresh start, I repeated thoughtfully. I wonder if you would have come with this offer if you hadn't seen me buying a Jaguar for cash. They didn't answer, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. The evening ended shortly thereafter. Hazel and Austin left with promises to call more often and invitations to dinner at their house. I thanked them politely but made no specific promises. When the door closed behind them, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sad that my only daughter saw me as nothing more than a source of potential gain. Relief because I finally saw the situation clearly, without illusions or false hopes. I sat in the chair by the window looking out at the starry sky. How many evenings had I spent the same way sitting in my old house when Elaine was still alive? We often talked about Hazel, about her future, about what she would grow up to be. Elaine was always an optimist. She'll find her way, my wife said. She has a good heart, she just doesn't know how to listen to it yet. Was she right? Does Hazel have that good heart under layers of selfishness and materialism? Or did Elaine and I only see in our daughter what we wanted to see? I remembered Hazel as a little girl, 5 years old with pigtails and freckles, bringing me drawings from work and proudly explaining that she drew Daddy building a big dam. Or as a teenager, stubborn but sincere, able to argue politics for hours or defend homeless animals. When and how did she turn into this cold, calculating woman for whom status and money became more important than human relationships? Maybe it's our fault with Elaine. We always tried to give her the best, a good education, opportunities we didn't have. Maybe we spoiled her, or didn't teach her to appreciate what was really important. I shook my head, pushing those thoughts away. There was no point in looking for reasons or blaming myself now. Hazel is a grown woman who has made her choice, and I have to accept it, no matter how bitter it is. I pulled out of my pocket an old photograph I always carried with me. Elaine and I on a picnic, Hazel between us. She's about 10 years old, laughing, showing off a butterfly she just caught. We all look so happy, so real. What happened to that family? The phone rings, interrupting my musings. Hazel's number. I paused for a moment before answering. Yeah? Dad. Her voice sounded uncertain. I just wanted to say thank you for dinner. It was delicious. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Pause. And also, I wanted to apologize for everything, for the way Austin and I treated you. It was wrong. I didn't know whether to believe those words or not. I realize that you probably don't trust us right now, she continued, and I don't blame you, but I want you to know that I'm really sorry. Thank you for apologizing, Hazel, I said finally. I appreciate it. Maybe, we could have lunch together sometime? Just you and me without Austin, like we used to. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to believe that she was sincere, that this wasn't another attempt to get at my money, that my daughter finally remembered that she had a father who loved her no matter what. But the other part, the more rational, more guarded part, reminded me of 2 years of neglect, of condescending glances, of talking in the third person as if I wasn't in the room, of the plans to send me to a nursing home, about how quickly their attitudes changed when they learned of my financial situation. Maybe, I said neutrally. Let's call next week and discuss. Okay. I could hear the disappointment in her voice at my reticence. I'll see you then. Bye, Hazel. I hung up the phone and looked at the picture in my hand again. Then I tucked it carefully back into my pocket. The past would be in the past. Now I had a new life, new opportunities, and freedom. Freedom from toxic relationships, from having to conform to other people's expectations, from the constant guilt of just existing. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Free to make my own decisions, to make my own mistakes, to live my life as I saw fit. I stood up and walked over to the window. My Jaguar was parked in the parking lot, reminding me of new opportunities, of the roads that awaited me. Tomorrow, I'll drive somewhere far away, maybe to the ocean. I'll listen to the music I like, stop where I want, eat what I want. Life didn't end at 78. For me, it was just beginning anew.